for you. You know that video that was going viral in the last few days? The video of the two doctors giving the press conference where they're talking about the medical and statistical reasons why the hype is not valid and we do not need lockdown anymore? I know you know it because literally dozens and dozens of you have emailed it to me over the last several days. I did put it in my newsletter last weekend. I talked about it with Burmus on Monday. I talked about it with Brad and Monica yesterday. Well, guess what? To the surprise of absolutely no one in the Corbett Report regular audience, YouTube has decided in its infinite wisdom that that video violates their terms of use. So it has been taken down, and mirrors of it have been put up and taken down. Guess what? Yes, this is the way things are going to roll in the infodemic, as I've been pointing out in my work recently, and precisely as YouTube specifically said they were going to start doing to any information that went against WHO guidelines and policies.
But then we also talk about removing information that is problematic. Of course, anything that is medically unsubstantiated. So people saying like, take vitamin C, take turmeric, like those all will cure you. Those are the examples of things that would be a violation of our policy. Anything that would go against World Health Organization recommendations would be a violation of our policy. And so remove is another really important part of our policy.
Yeah. As I say, absolutely no surprise whatsoever to anyone in the Corbett Report audience. Of course, this is the way that things are going to roll in COVID-1984, and this is the excuse to start rolling out the mass censorship, or to continue rolling out the mass censorship, I should more accurately say. But as I say, you already know all of this. So here's the question for today. Can you find the video? Because everyone who has been sending it to me has been sending links to various YouTube versions of that video, but YouTube is taking it down as fast as people are putting it up right now, and I've seen even articles people writing about the video getting taken down. But don't worry, here's another version of it, and then that version gets taken down. Of course, because if you keep linking to YouTube, guess what? YouTube now has algorithms in place. There's no one who's going to be able to put this up where it's going to remain on YouTube. So it's almost like we'll have to look somewhere else for this information.
I went and found a British Journal of Medical Practitioners article, and it says, the right to consent, is it absolute? So that's what you're looking for if you want to look this up. It has a legal framework, and it reads, a medical intervention without valid informed consent is a criminal offence, and the physician can be charged with battery. Examples of such situations include treatment against the patient's will, different treatment than the one consented for, and treatment after consenting deliberately with wrong information. And this is governed by the General Medical Council. So, that's the understanding of informed consent. You have to be told the correct information, the side effects, everything that's associated with it, everything that you want to know about it, and give your consent knowing all of that. If they've lied to you, if they do it without your permission, they've committed a criminal offence. Okay, that's how it was before the COVID-19 happened. Then it talks about what happens about protecting the public against infectious diseases, which COVID-19 is one. Okay, and things slightly start to change now. In order to protect the public from contagious infectious diseases, the Public Health Control of Disease Act 1984 regulates notification of diseases and mandatory treatment of conditions such as tuberculosis. The individual's rights to consent is severely restricted in two areas. Firstly, information about the patient's diagnosis has to be given to the relevant authorities, so that's confidentiality. So if you wanted to talk to a doctor in confidence, that's gone out the window now because they can discuss you with anybody. Secondly, patients suffering from communicable diseases can be forced to take their medication by supervised administration or involuntary inpatient treatment. So you can be forced to take your medication. That's a vaccine. And it cites here that in the North Manchester General Hospital, the act was used to prevent the spread of TB to the wider public by forcing treatment onto an individual who was not compliant. Okay, so they can do that anyway, yeah? So under COVID-19, so what's happened? So I looked up the Control of Disease Act 1984 and I printed it out, and it's here. And it deals with, for the first half of it, infectious diseases coming through ports, airports, by ship, and all that kind of stuff. Once you get past that, you'll find the domestic stuff, how it applies to us as people, our property, and our things. Just to let you know that the first thing that will strike you when you look up this act on the government website is that it says changes to legislation. And this has been updated on the 27th of April 2020, so just a day or so ago, and it's come into force on that day. So this is applicable from now. This is in operation now. Okay, so what can they do? A person commits an offence if the person fails without reasonable excuse to comply with restriction or requirement imposed by the order, willfully obstructs anyone acting in the execution of the order. So if you say, no, you don't want the vaccine, they can't deliver the vaccine to you, you commit an offence. You don't have to be violent, you don't have to... all you have to do is fail to give a reasonable excuse. Why don't you want it? Because I don't know what's in it. You're having it. No, I'm not. You've committed an offence. Straight away. Willful obstruction is just trying to stop them from delivering it to people, I guess. Or you yourself, so you commit an offence again. And that's a £5,000 fine, or up to a £5,000 fine. And each day that doesn't get paid off that fine, they are allowed to add more debt onto you. But they can also, the court has the power to impose a requirement that a person be detained or kept in isolation or quarantined in a place. So they can detain you, this is part of the thing, indefinitely. It takes a judge to get you out. The person leaves that place contrary to the requirement. A constable may take the person into custody and return the person to that place. They can arrest you off the street, take you to the police station, into custody, then take you to a hospital. That's disappearing people. Your family won't know where you've gone. You won't know where you are. You'll arrive in a hospital or one of these detention centres. Do you have the right to prosecute? No, you don't. They have given themselves a get out jail free card, so you can't even prosecute them. So if you're wealthy, you can't take them to court. In fact, you can't take the relevant health protection authority to court, or anyone who's administered anything or anything to do with it, basically. And it says here, at the final, but last but not least, Crown property and Her Majesty. This law does not affect them. It only affects you. So please sign up to www.govote.org.uk to vote for the independent testing of any COVID vaccine that they produce, because if this is mandatory, this is what we're going to have to deal with. Yeah. So at least you want to know that it's safe, that it's actually not going to harm you. It's not going to give you cancers. It's not going to make you infertile. There's no additives in there, because otherwise you're going to commit an offence by saying you don't want it, or you're going to question it. So go to www.govote.org.uk and please vote. We need 10,000 votes to get this in front of Parliament. So it'd be great if we could get more.
Non-essential businesses will stay closed. Only essential services should remain open. Unfortunately, many people are still not taking it seriously. There were crowds of people visiting the cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. and
Jessica Andres! Whoa!
Large gatherings on the beach in Ocean City and on the boardwalk and at many of the county and local parks across our state. Let me repeat once again, as strongly as I possibly can, if you are engaged in this kind of activity,
you are breaking the law,
and you are literally endangering the lives of your family, your friends, and your fellow citizens.
Go down, you murderer, go down.
As I told the people of Ohio yesterday, the monster is still loose.
I'm scared. It doesn't seem like folks here are scared enough.
All right, here it is. The official re-entry from the basement, cleared by CDC. A little sweaty, just worked out. Happens. This is what I've been dreaming of, literally for weeks. My wife, she was cleared by the CDC. She doesn't have fever. She doesn't have the symptoms anymore. More than 7 days from quarantine. We're still a little scared, so I'll just give you one of the...
That's right. So you just compared it to the annual influenza. So there is a vaccine typically for that. The new IHME numbers, University of Washington model that I think most of our leaders have been referring to, suggests about 60,000 deaths nationwide by August 4th. That would be fewer than what the annual influenza caused a couple of years ago with a vaccine. So does that shake your faith at all in the utility of a vaccine for this disease? Maybe it's not the final answer.
Destroy America. Shred the Constitution. Trample the Bill of Rights. Obey your governor. The governors are in charge now. We will be your daddy. Do not disobey your daddy.
Yeah, it doesn't shake my faith in either the vaccine, which all experts think is at least a year and a half away.
It does tell me that if the death tolls are around the numbers that you've just referred to, Tucker, that all of the actions we're taking are making a difference.
Do not disobey your daddy.
Let me ask you about the specific measures you just referred to. Now, large gatherings are banned, but liquor stores are deemed an essential service. Why, on the basis of what scientific evidence did you decide that?
Couple of things. One is there are liquor stores in our state that actually have a little bit too many backroom gatherings.
The governors are in charge now.
So we had a little bit of a challenge. We had to remind folks that liquor stores may be open, but to your point, gatherings are not allowed.
We will be your daddy.
If we were to shutter those stores down, we'd have unintended mental health and addiction prices to pay, unintended consequences.
So, but you have closed church services and synagogue services and arrested people for attempting to attend them.
Do not disobey your daddy.
Did anyone say that maybe practicing your faith might be important to someone's mental health?
Critical thinking in this way as an aberration must be destroyed.
Listen, I think we've had a very good common ground with faith leaders of literally every faith who understand this. And by the way, whether it's a liquor store, a pharmacy, a supermarket, we expect folks to distance themselves from each other, to wear face coverings, etc.
We will be your daddy.
There's an enormous amount of faith going on virtually right now, a lot of practicing going on, and we care deeply about both physical health and mental health.
Of course, but I don't want to be too persistent on this, but I think it's important. On what scientific basis did you decide that sitting in a church was much more dangerous than buying liquor in a liquor store? And why is buying liquor more important for the social fabric? I'm just trying to think. You're not the only governor who's done this, and I don't mean to pick on you, but I don't understand the reasoning. I don't want to think it had anything to do with tax revenue. I'm just trying to get to the science here because I assume all of us are following the lead of epidemiologists. Arresting someone for sitting alone on the beach, tell me how that arrests the spread of the coronavirus from an epidemiological point of view.
Yeah, I wasn't referring to that. I actually don't have the specifics.
Noted before, 15 congregants at a synagogue in New Jersey were arrested and charged for being in a synagogue together. Now, the Bill of Rights, as you well know, protects Americans' right, enshrines their right to practice their religion as they see fit and to congregate together, to assemble peacefully. By what authority did you nullify the Bill of Rights in issuing this order? How do you have the power to do that?
That's above my pay grade, Tucker. So I wasn't thinking of the Bill of Rights when we did this.
Try not to overthink things, okay?
Since you are an elected official, a leader in the government, an executive, how do you have the authority to order something that so clearly contravenes the Bill of Rights of the United States, the U.S. Constitution? Where do you get the authority to do that?
Well, here's the thing. We know we need to stay away from each other.
911, what is your emergency?
Yeah, I'd like to report a crime in progress. There's a group of about 12 kids playing soccer, and we were hoping you guys could come out and arrest them all.
But there is specific behaviour the police can enforce. They might send or take people back to where they live if they're out for anything other than daily exercise or picking up essential items. They can instruct groups of 3 or more to go home and can fine people who are outside without a valid reason.
Back in the 1970s, I was this enthusiastic psychology major in college, and I was trying to figure out what I believed and why I believed the things that I did. And so I would read various kinds of things. And I came across a book by Carl Menninger, and he's kind of a pioneer in psychiatry and psychology. And in his book, Dr. Menninger used the term groupthink. And as soon as I saw that word, it's like a little light bulb went off with me. It's like, oh, I can so relate.
People have been locked up. We've been talking about cabin fever. Now it's a nice day. I'm going to get out. I'm going to go take a walk. Now is not the time to do that. And frankly, there has been a laxness on social distancing, especially over this past weekend, that is just wholly unacceptable.
You know, when we talk about groupthink, we talk about having pressure to conform to a group's biases. And it's done in such a way that inhibits creative and independent and out-of-the-box kind of thinking, and especially groupthink will discourage dissent.
We must flatten the curve. We expect folks to distance themselves from each other.
You are breaking the law.
Parks locked up, but in Toronto, they've been the scene of social distancing fails, leading to dozens of complaints.
We just heard a little bit more music, and because my boyfriend and I are in the middle of a move, we happened to be outside.
In Revelstoke, BC, Zoe Purvis was shocked to see a party across the street and called the RCMP non-emergency line to report it.
Played a little bit on my heartstring just because I'm being so cautious. They either don't know or they just really don't care.
Or they don't groupthink. See this as totalitarian. Don't snitch on their neighbors and know that just driving in their car, they are more likely to be killed and kill someone in an accident. In short, they might also be thoughtful people who, because of the fear that's been incited, you have lost perspective of and have literally reported your neighbor for having friends over. You should actually hear yourself. Revisit this video if you think like this woman a year from now. If we have it.
They're constantly monitored by facial recognition cameras that are able to instantly put a face to a name. Now, the Chinese are also ranked, given a mark out of a possible 950 points. A score in the 700s is considered good. Around the 500 mark is not. For now, the number is a sort of bank credit rating, keeping track of everyone's spending habits.
I think being ranked is a good thing. A society has to have rules.
It forces us to be well-behaved.
It may seem scary, but it's just like that here. We're used to it, and anyway, we don't have a choice.
Groupthink sets up the potential for abuse, where a person can be scorned simply for being not the same, simply for being different.
In an effort to keep all of its subjects in line, Beijing is taking the system a step further in 2020. It's aggregating data gathered by banks, private companies, and the state to rate if someone's a good or bad citizen.
By using the most data possible, the so-called big data, the system will play an important role in rebuilding a moral society.
The state will go over every detail of a person's life with a fine-tooth comb. Their financial situation, spending habits, career, even behavior on social media. Criticizing the government online or displaying outward signs of wealth is a no-no. On the other hand, praising the party or giving blood increases your social credit. Xiao Wen Wang is a model citizen. She lives in Nanjing, a testing ground for social ranking. Married with a child, she has a job in a retirement home, no debts, and she wouldn't dream of jaywalking.
As a good citizen, I respect the rules of the road. If I didn't, I'd lose points on my social credit.
In theory, everything can be taken into account in the social score, even the most innocuous errands like supermarket shopping. When Xiao Wen Wang makes an electronic payment, her purchases tell the state a lot about her. Buying cigarettes would count against her. On the other hand, nappies show she's an attentive mother. Beer could indicate alcoholism. She'd be better off buying water. In this pilot city of 8 million people, there are only 18,000 model citizens. For Xiao Wen Wang, there are perks to be had, such as paying half price for the bus.
I get discounts for all public services, even at museums. And the library is free for me, thanks to my school.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
It's a matter of principle. Those people have to be condemned.
Unfortunately, many people are still not taking it seriously.
Those people aren't honest, so they have to pay the price.
It's only right to pay your debts. You have to blacklist those that don't.
The Supreme Court has created a blacklist for so-called bad citizens, those whose ratings have dropped to zero. On it are companies, but also 23 million people to date. Among them is this journalist Liu Hu. He got a little too close to uncovering corruption among high-profile party members. After being sued for defamation by the subject of a story he'd written, he was blacklisted. But he only realized when he tried to buy a train ticket and was told he was banned from traveling.
That tells me I'm still on the blacklist.
Punished because he's been branded untrustworthy by the state.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
Yu Hu is among a tiny minority of people who have dared to criticize the system, which some are calling a digital dictatorship.
I worry, because I think many people like me will be deprived of individual freedoms, and all of us will live with restrictions of one kind or another.
For those of you just unquestioningly in compliance with this unprecedented takeover of our rights and liberties, what world do you think you live in? Do you actually trust your media? Your entertainment industry? Can you? Do you think it's not all essentially a propaganda wing of the government? Are you that blind? You're so willing to report your neighbor for having some guests over, or yell at kids in the backyard who are playing together, in your artificially induced fear state driven by the media, and you're essentially inviting what's to come on in. This may be it, or it may just be a test run, but they're learning quite a lot about your social score.
Most people want to belong to their peer group. They want to be the same as everyone else when it comes to opinions. In fact, they judge their own personal sanity by bouncing ideas off their neighbors and friends who will answer back and agree on these same topics in kind. It doesn't matter if the topics or what you're given are facts or utter nonsense. As long as everyone agrees at the same time, you'll say, well, I'm sane, and your friends will all agree because they've had the same information given to them. We don't only get the same information given to us, we're led through sequences, even documentaries, to leave you with a predetermined fixed conclusion on any given topic. Most folk are once again unaware of this. They think, I've just been given all the facts on this topic, and this is the obvious conclusion, which is always given to you by the final experts on the particular program. There's no thinking involved. We tie this in with the Brzezinski. Brzezinski said in 2 Ages, now this guy was way up with the NSA. He's a master geopolitician. He admits he works in 20, 50-year periods to do with geopolitics in other countries. But he said himself, the public will shortly be unable to think or reason for themselves. He says he was meaning by the form of information that was given to them, the type, the formulas that were in use then in the 1970s. And eventually, he said, they will expect the media to do other things.
If we do any or all of the above, we blow our chances of flattening this curve. You probably put yourself or your family members personally at risk, and I can promise you we put our health system at risk.
It's me, Jack Black. It's time to flatten the curve.
And it's working. It is flattening the curve.
It's because of this virus that we have to take these extraordinary measures, and my job is to try to flatten the curve.
That's why people today can't think outside of their programming from television.
The worst irony that could come about from these demonstrations is that they forced us to stay in this posture longer than we're already planning to.
As COVID-19 has taken over our lives now, some are concerned less by the virus and are more concerned with the removal of our rights and draconian measures being put into place. Where some interpret Governor Whitmer as encouraging them to help keep others safe, others see her having hinted at the practicing of our inalienable rights enshrined in the Constitution as somehow delaying our going back to life as usual. It turns neighbor against neighbor. The subtext here is that if you protest, you delay everyone's recovery and therefore you should be ostracized as a bad person.
Currently, right now, outside of Queen's Park, where you're located, there is a protest with about 100 folks who are calling for the end of the lockdown here in this province and across this country. What message do you have to people who are not taking this seriously, but also who could be not adhering to social and physical distancing protocols?
Well, that's a great question. You know, when I looked out the window and we see these people that are absolutely irresponsible. It's reckless to do what they're doing. And personally, I think it's selfish. We have, a bunch of yahoos out in the front of Queen's Park sitting there protesting that the place isn't open.
That is Ontario Premier Doug Ford calling protesters selfish, a bunch of yahoos. Many citizens who are malleable to this form of programming will turn against those standing up for their rights, compliantly endorsing and accepting the government's removal of said rights. If you remove the talk of governments saying that they actually care for you, if you remove the virus from this equation, the guise of it, this would not be accepted under any other circumstances outside of acts of war. However, because the populace has been convinced that the threat of death is more important than their daily lives and rights,
think about the potential effects of passing something on, whether it's this virus, COVID-19 virus, or another one. It's not worth the risk.
Individuals are actually feeling they are being patriotic by forfeiting said rights and turning on those neighbors who stand up for them.
On the streets of Harrisburg, some protesters say they need relief now.
As a small business owner, I want to stand up for my employees and our way of life to be able to earn a living.
Aaron Riddle says the governor's order has forced him to lay off 30 of his employees.
He's closed construction business. He's one of 5 states that deem construction non-essential, non-life-sustaining, so I had to lay off my employees. We have no work.
We're exercising our First Amendment by saying that we think this is unfair and Americans need to get back to work.
This is not an issue limited to protesting. Just walking down the street or in a park might get you on your state governor's next COVID briefing to the press, demagoguing those who don't trust them, who don't buy the idea that daily life is akin to drunk driving, who value their freedoms over promises of safety.
Frankly, there has been a laxness on social distancing, especially over this past weekend, that is just wholly unacceptable.
This is what they do with citizens in China, just so you know. You can easily make your local news by jaywalking or running a red light, publicly shamed by the unquestioned powers that be. In context, what Governor Cuomo is calling out is people walking in a park.
The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
Has everyone forgotten how untrustworthy these politicians are? It appears we have. Overnight, we suddenly placed aside all we know of them and receive our programming, a potent hypnosis telling each of us how to think. If you dissent, if you do not groupthink, you become society's pariah. Is that your country? Is that the country you want to live in? What assurance do you have that they're ever going to give you back the rights that you so willingly gave away?
The working class people did not have credit cards. You could not get a credit card. You couldn't get a bank loan without collateral to put something up against it. So therefore you were at pretty well a fixed income. There was no extra cash outside of rent, food and so on, clothes for the children. essentials. There was no extras for luxuries. There was no credit given to them. Yet the British government, just like the Chinese government did 2 years ago, made it a mandate that every household in Britain must get a television set.
Your information about COVID-19 is highly controlled. Your news outlets are definitely pushing an agenda. But even here on YouTube, if you go searching for information about the coronavirus, all you're actually going to find are official news sources. You have to do some real digging to find dissent. This is highlighted by the removal of a recent ABC broadcast of Drs. Daniel Erickson and Artin Masihi in California. They recently offered their findings regarding the pandemic, findings which were controversial because they contradict the official narrative. After receiving some 5 million views and having gone viral, the video was removed by YouTube for violating their guidelines, following a television broadcast with the two, which suddenly brought those who depend on that light box in their living room for the truth, running onto the internet to find it. Mirrors of the video have been removed. Doctors' groups have been marched out to condemn the men. And yet if anyone has watched the video, these men come off as credible, informed, and concerned for our true public safety. You can always find someone who disagrees with you to bring onto the news and discredit someone, even a group of them. That doesn't mean they are right. This is why we have discussions and debates, supposedly, in this country. Censorship merely stifles the truth. And it should tell you something when discussions about something interfering so blatantly with the world's lives cannot be discussed if it doesn't follow a particular script.
But when you start changing and making it law, that certain words can no longer be used, even in ordinary conversation. After all, we speak because we communicate. When you can end communication, then you're into George Orwell's 1984, where the dictionary gets thinner and thinner and thinner, and there's newspeak, you see, the new terminology to use, which conveys only what the elite want it to convey.
The American State Department, in the most unprecedented move I have seen ever, level 4 for travel advisory. That means, Nara, do not travel. It covers the entire world. This level 4 is usually reserved for countries within a state of war. Think of Yemen or Somalia.
Every press conference, every news broadcast uses the vocabulary of must, do, comply, stay. No discussion. If you dare to question this, or to ask the question as to whether or not this is all ridiculous, you will promptly be put in your place, or, as happened with Dr. Erickson and his colleague, censored and condemned altogether. We won't even have the discussion.
And you can eventually have words, there's words missing that you need to use to explain actual reality. It's gone. And as the dictionary gets thinner and thinner too, and it's full of newspeak, it's impossible for anyone to foment revolution, because no one will be able to understand the other person. The words are gone to express it. You can't express anything that matters. Isn't that interesting, eh? It's no coincidence. No coincidence that you have these new censor departments on what you say. Because what you say, remember, is only a reflection of what you think. Thought crime. Thought crime. And now you have speech crime. And so on, and so on, and so on.
All right, we've got such a huge reaction to the two docs we had on at the top of the show, Dan Erickson and Artin Masihi. Well, YouTube just took down their viral video challenging the COVID narrative when it comes to, what's happening in California especially. Ironically, this is exactly what they warned about, that this isn't about science, this is about control. And in this case, control of a narrative. We should have seen it coming. YouTube CEO was on CNN 8 days ago saying, quote, anything that would go against World Health Organization recommendations would be a violation of our policy. Removal is another really important part of our policy. Well, if you aren't worried about censorship in this country, you better be now. It's not the government doing it, but something that controls so much of the dialogue is fairly close to the kind of censorship I never thought we'd see in this country. That is truly terrifying.
I would definitely disagree with Ingram that it is not the government, as these days there's no distinction. Why would YouTube want to censor the content without pressure from outside? And from whom? There's a global agenda afoot. It says Novus Ordo Seclorum on the back of your dollar bill. Check it out. I'm not promoting Laura Ingraham. I'm not promoting Fox News. I'm not a fan of either, and I'm not a fan of mainstream news in general. I am grateful that they had the men on, though it will make it easily dismissed by those who have been trained to view life along party lines as being now a partisan issue. These men are partisan hacks, rather than doctors, scientists. It's not partisan. COVID-19 is not something we need the left versus right paradigm present in. But it is no less because decades of brainwashing and foolish trust vested in the government by the American people has been built up in the minds of far too many.